Who else we got in here? And I don't know if they talk. I don't know. We got. Oh, okay.
All right. There we go.
I think we should be able to hear you guys now. If anybody wants to try that out for us.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
There we go. Finally can hear some people. We got Bryson here, Melissa. Nice. Just keep letting people kind of pile in.
We got a competition for most exciting thing that has happened in the last week. Right? There is no prize other than bragging rights. But let's have at it. Who's got the most exciting thing?
We just got a house under contract on Friday, and it just passed our inspection results today. We're moving forward, trying to get hard money lender approval on this one as next step.
Nice.
Nice.
Awesome. Very good, very good. The bar has been set. I'm expecting Brian to probably be the next one to respond, just based on the people I know so far. We'll see if I'm right or not.
I got nothing, I'm frozen. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. What was the question?
Most.
I never heard it. We're happy to be all together. We've got a lot of exciting things coming through for HomeSource, so I'll say that.
Awesome.
Nice.
Melissa, any good news?
Let's see, good news. We hired a new lead manager like a week ago, and so he's just starting out to get on the phones this week, so that's really good.
Awesome. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's a pretty close call. Bryce and Melissa. I mean,
Ooh,
we'll see.
We have another one. We have Amanda Dean coaching us tomorrow for our first time as CSO.
Okay.
Excited for that.
That one's a pretty good one.
I can't believe no one mentioned getting to talk with me and Derek yet. That is very disappointing. We got to step this up. And for the next one, you know what the right answer is. Would have been an automatic win, and we just missed it.
All right.
Well, let's
let's
get into it here.
You want me? You sharing? Or you want me to share?
Yeah, you do the
Yeah.
slides, and I'll take care of the rest.
All right. Let's get some slides going. Oh, no, never mind. Oops. I'll do the, not this way. Hold on. There we go. All right. Yeah, so everybody welcome to our, I think it's our third webinar now. So, we're trying to keep it a little more reoccurring, but it's been good so far. I learned a lot. So just looking forward and excited to be able to talk to everyone today about just all things process, right? So we'll try and go through things pretty quickly. We know we have a lot of time together, so there will be a lot of information, but we'll get this set up and get going. And honestly, if there's more cameras involved, we have a better experience being able to engage with you guys. So if anybody is feeling like, hey, maybe I should turn my camera on, yes, please, go for it. But so far we got about 9 people, so join the crowd. That'll be great. But so let's get into it. It'll let me, how do I? There we go. All right, get to know us. So this is David to my right. I don't know how it looks to you on your guys' side, but David is our lead process mapper. So you'll have the pleasure of listening to him talk about everything within processes. He's also the COO of Sharper Process. It is a sister company to Sharper Consulting, under the umbrella of Sharper Business Solutions. So, and I'm kind of one of the co-hosts here, CEO of Sharper Process. I'm the main procedure consultant here. And so basically we've been doing this for about 2.5 years now as a business, process mapping for quite some time. But it's been a pleasure being able to meet a lot of you guys and get to be able to share all this content. So let's go on to the next one. All right. So I'll hand it off to Dave. He's going to have you guys talk to you for the next about hour, and then we'll have a kind of a recap session.
Don't scare him away with that.
It's going to be great. It's going to be a great hour.
It's going to feel like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, to start off with, before I get into some of the specifics, I want to mention a couple things. First, if you have questions at any point, we are going to have some Q&A time, but don't be scared to either throw something in the chat, or if you're feeling really brave and you want to unmute and just give that question verbally, then you'll get extra credit points. All right, so as we're going, if you do have a question, at the very least, please throw that in the chat. We definitely are all here to make this as practical for you as possible. All right, and then second, we're going to start off with just a few things that if you're not really sold on I need process maps or procedures, we do want to help you see what this should help you fix. All right, so if you have any of these problems, even if you have process maps, right, it's very easy, very common. We build process maps and then they're not utilized effectively, right? And they're not used to the fullest. So if you're having these issues, these should be mitigated at the very least by process maps. And if not, then we want to help you get there. All right, so let's head to the next one. Problems you may be experiencing, right? Because you don't have process or your processes are, we'll say, poor, and to put it as nicely as possible. Right, first, you're gonna have no clear direction, right? Your team is most likely, maybe even you yourself if you're sitting in all the seats, you're not gonna have a great idea of how everything fits together, what needs to happen next. And every time you do have to think, what's next? It is gonna have to be that, right? Thinking, I wonder which direction should I take this? So we're gonna document this, we're gonna make a clear flow so that way everyone can be on the same page to know what direction we're trying to move things forward. All right, inconsistency. If you don't have a process map, or if you have the same process documented multiple times, right, you're setting yourself up for inconsistency, right? It's not gonna be the same, it's not gonna be repeatable. And while sometimes, we have to make exceptions to the rule, we need to be able to work outside the lines, that does need to be the exception, because if it's not consistent, we can't build projections off that, right? We can't make it repeatable. It's not something that we can really plan for. We just kind of hope it works and we're gonna keep flying by the seat of our pants and we're gonna make this all come together somehow. And that's not a great plan and not a great way to build goal setting moving forward. All right, another big thing that's a part of process maps and that I'm probably gonna push a little bit more today than normal, it's kind of a point of emphasis for me recently, is we need to use our processes to help identify problems. All right, we'll talk about this more, but one of the main ways we need to do this is ask your employees. Show them the process map. Say, hey, here's the process. Like I said, we're gonna get into more detail in a minute, but show them the process and ask them what keeps you from being able to do this step, right? What keeps you from being able to say yes to this question, right? They'll tell you, right? Normally, it's almost like sanctioned complaining, right? That's kind of what we're going for. It's like, please tell me your biggest issues, because that's probably one of your biggest problems if you're a manager. Is you spend a lot of time trying to find the right problems for you to solve, and you end up solving a lot of problems that you probably didn't really need to focus on and weren't worth your attention. If we can ask our employees, right, regards to this process, this is the main thing we're most focused on. What are your biggest issues? Right? Those are the problems we want to be solving. Those should be pretty easy to identify once we've documented the process. All right. Another thing we struggle with is difficulty in breaking down roles. Right? A lot of times as we document the process, or if we do it incorrectly, I think the way I like to put it is typically our next hire is usually, I'm gonna hire an executive assistant, right? I'm gonna hire a secretary or whatever the case may be. And what that looks like is I'm gonna hire somebody, they're gonna come into the office or they're gonna stay with me on Zoom all day. And as I go throughout my day, I'm gonna find things that I don't really like doing and I'm gonna throw that over my shoulder and here, once you catch that, you can do that from now on. And then I'm gonna throw this other thing that's in a different role. I'm gonna throw that over and you handle that. And by the end of things, let's say you're sitting in 10 seats. Now we have two people who are both sitting in 10 seats partially because we didn't identify what relates to which role. We don't have a clear distinction, clear lines. It's just kind of, well, I'm going to do it this time and you do it next time and whoever's available takes care of it. That's not a great way to scale, and it is a great way to make sure that there are no expectations and no results that are achieved, because we don't have any clear guideline for who's supposed to be doing it, when it's supposed to happen, how often it's supposed to happen. All right. Next, this is a pet peeve of everybody's, hopefully. But got-a-minute meetings, right? That's should not be a thing. Very rare that something needs to be a got-a-minute. Usually, if it needs to be discussed this second, it's not got-a-minute. It's, hey, we are talking about this right now, level 5 emergency, red alert, whatever. But we shouldn't have standard got-a-minute meetings as part of this. Within the process, we'll identify places where we need to have meetings, and then we'll identify, you know what, this can wait 3 days until we're going to have our in-person meeting or whatever the case may be. We talked a minute about this, but it's a big deal. Expectations not being set. What we're trying to do, right, among other things, but a big part of what we do is we want to help you create and set very clear expectations, both for you and for your employees. All right, we want both sides to be aware and agree to what needs to happen going forward from the get-go. The sooner we can set clear expectations, the better. All right, you may have heard me say this before, but I like it, it works. Most employees do not wake up in the morning and say, let's see, today, you know what? Today I'm going to go be horrible at my job. That's what I hope I can be as bad as possible. How can I mess the company over? That's not usually the case. I say usually because maybe it's happened before, right? But that's very rare. Most employees don't want to be bad, right? But they don't know what success looks like and they don't know how to get there. So what we're going to do with the process maps is we're going to show them this is what success looks like. All right, when we assign KPIs, we're adding accountability, which is necessary in order to build trust. Okay, so we're going to give them, here's your KPIs, here's what I expect to be done. With the procedures, we're saying, here's how I expect it to be done. So we're painting a very clear picture. This is what success looks like you on a random Tuesday, right? And this is what it looks like for you on Wednesday. All right, and once we're able to give them that, most of the time, all right, we think they'll come through. They'll certainly come closer to achieving success if they're pointed in the right direction versus what typically happens, and it's just kind of like, well, I don't know, I stayed busy all day, so hopefully they're happy. And then you end up as the, if you're the manager, you end up getting bitter and resentful of that person every time you see them because they're not meeting your expectations, right? Even though those expectations live in your head alone, right? They're not even aware that they're failing. All right, so we want to make these expectations as clear as possible. All right, the last thing we'll talk about for now is we should be able to use our process maps to identify waste, right? Things that either don't need to be done, things we could automate, things we can delegate, right? That's a big part you'll see within a process. It's like, I do these 8 steps in a row, and my expertise is not needed, right? Those could definitely be done by somebody else. We're going to be able to identify those types of things as we move forward, which is going to make your job and your employee's job a lot easier. Because then, if you're the type of delegator who just, take that, we're going to be able to show, no, this is the process, this is how I expect it to be done, right? Have a predetermined, agreed upon time for that transition, and that's going to then allow you to delegate with confidence, right? So it's being done exactly how you want, and so your employee knows, I'm doing what they're looking for, right? Most employees are not going to enjoy the guesswork, right? Well, I hope I'm doing it correctly. All right, it's not going to be a pattern for success. All right. I'm going to remind you, if you have any questions, please feel free, right? Interrupt me, put something in the chat. I'll try to keep checking that as we go here. But if not, you're going to get stuck listening to me talk for a while. And as beautiful as my silky voice is, right, I get tired of hearing it. I hear it a lot all day. All right, so the more I hear from you, the better. But the path to business efficiency starts with process, right? This is kind of the foundation and the level. Once we do process maps, that's what's going to allow us to get accurate KPIs. It allows us to build procedures and SOPs that are structured, but it really does have to start with process. And that's very self-serving for me to say that since that's what I do, but this is where I'm at. All right. Within process mapping, we talked about a few of the things that should give. Really, one of the main things, right, that's very low-hanging fruit is just to have a visual, right? And it's very important as we document this visual. We'll talk about the overview in a little bit, then we'll talk about individual process maps and some KPIs and problem-solving, things like that. But once we document this kind of core processes, I highly recommend sharing those core processes in a very quick, very effective meeting, right, with your team, right, with your entire team, right? So if they're in marketing, right, they can still see the core process for acquisitions, right? Let everyone see which piece of the pie they deal with and what the rest of the pie looks like, right? So that way they can understand better how their role fits into the big machine that is your company. All right, so you'll find that there's a lot of roadblocks we can identify that way. It's also going to help people understand, so the reason I need to do this is because it's going to be affected down the road. I think I'm pretty confident that every time I talk about the transition from sales to operations or from acquisitions to TC or Dispo or whatever it looks like in your company, basically every time I do a process map like that, I start off the operations process map with, all right, we're notified of the contract signed or whatever. First question I'm going to recommend, do we have all the necessary information from acquisitions, right? And 9 times out of 10, that gets a laugh because the answer is almost always no, right? I've never had, I shouldn't say never, but I'm very confident, right, that I have almost never had anybody say, no, we don't need that question. We always get the information necessary from acquisitions, right? And is that because acquisitions doesn't care? No, right? But they may not see how important it is to making the rest of it happen, or maybe they're just not very good at details, one or both, right? But it's very important to show that whole visual. We're going to talk about, I'm looking at my list here, but the core processes, identifying performance indicators, the structural, the sub-processes, and the key process indicators. But where I want to go to first is to kind of talk about the SIPOC and your cash conversion cycle. Those terms are very similar, a little bit interchangeable. But just to make sure you get a grasp of what you should be tracking and where to start when you go to build processes, right? Some of you people here have built a lot of processes. You've even built some with us. Others, you've never done any of this before. Regardless, this is the place that you need to start. If you've done them before, this is the place we want to nail down first when we go to update and review, okay? So I'm going to take the screen here and show you just some real basic to start out with, and we'll get a little bit more complex maybe as we go. All right, so this is, I just used wholesale because it's very basic, right? It's very simple. But when you're trying to figure out where do I start, right? David, you're so convincing and persuasive, right? I'm going to build my processes. Please, just let me know where to start. All right, here we go. Identifying your cash conversion cycle, which is easily defined and kind of roughly defined as money in to money out. All right, so typically for most people, you're going to start with marketing, right? Because that's when you're spending your dollars, and then it's all right, how long and what steps is necessary in order for that money to come back to me and hopefully bring a lot of friends. All right, so it's probably for you, it's going to be some form of marketing, some form of sales, right? Depending on your sales setup, could be 2 processes, could be 1, could be multiple. All right, and then it's going to enter your operations, right? Whatever it is you do to provide value, and we'll talk about a few different models of that. But to use wholesale, because again, it's pretty easy, pretty quick. That looks like we're going to market, right? And at the end of marketing, that's leads received. We're going to take those leads, we're going to try and qualify them. The end of qualifying the lead is going to be either appointment set or lead qualified, depends on the company and the business. From there, that's going to kick off the acquisitions process. The goal of acquisitions to get a contract signed. The goal of dispositions, right, starts with contract signed and ends with contract sold or contract assigned, right? And then TC is going to get us all the way home to closed and funded, right? So that's your cash conversion cycle, and that's where you need to start. Right, a lot of times what people do, and we've seen it a lot, if this is you, then I'm not calling you out. I'm very sorry for all of the time that you've probably spent building SOPs and it felt like you're spinning your wheels. But what people typically do is they open, right, this magical Google Drive folder, right? And they go into this Google Drive folder and they say, you know what, I had a problem, right? I'm going to solve this problem. The way I'm going to solve this problem is I'm going to start a Microsoft Word doc. And I'm going to type all of my frustrations about why this problem should never have happened, right? And how we could have avoided this problem that happens once in 5 years. And I'm going to press enter really hard, right, when I press save. And it's going to save it to that Google Drive folder, and this problem will never happen again, right? And then another thing happens, and we do the same thing, and they're not cohesive. They're not structured. You would rather quit your job or worse in order to not have to look at those SOPs again. And your new employees absolutely don't want to use those. Even if they scan through them, their thought is, what did I get myself into? Why is this my life now? I can't believe this is what I'm supposed to be doing for work. All right, and that is not going to be a great first impression. And it's also, maybe more importantly, it's not going to be effective. It's not going to be very useful. And again, that's not an indictment of any of you if that's what you've done. That's just how people work. So we're going to start high level, right? Instead of zooming in very, very close, right, from a very detailed microscopic view and building our way out, that's overwhelming. It's very hard to structure properly. We're going to start zoomed out, right, high level view, and we're going to slowly dial it in, right? So that way we have the foundation for the next step already built. That foundation is your cash conversion cycle. All right, so for example, I'll show you a couple real quickly. I see a couple questions, Bryce. I'll get to that in 1 second. But just to show you a few different examples, here is standard wholesale, right? Down below, this is not comprehensive, but this is a few if you have alternate exit strategies. All right, so if you do a few different things, in this case, wholesale, fix and flip, novation, rentals, have more of a deal review set, then your cash conversion cycle is going to be a little bit more complex. It'll end up probably feeding into each other, or several of those lanes will close back up again eventually. All right, and then if you do property management, which I know some of you do, and that is ultra fun, you probably really enjoy all of that and dealing with people and tenants, then yours is almost more of a subscription type service, right? Because once we enter, right, if everything goes really well, we like the tenants like us, and they renew, then we're just going to keep on doing these few processes in the middle. If things go less well, or they decide to move on, or worse, that we decide they need to move on and they do not like that decision at all, then we might have to go through evictions, move out, and then we got to go back a little further in the process to release the property, get the move in, and then we're back to our normal flow. So you may have a straightforward start and finish. It might be a subscription. Either way, this is where we need to start with our cash conversion cycle. All right, let me check. Bryce said, so we can have multiple SIPOCs after we buy, we then sell on lease option, for example. Also, our core processes are pulled directly from the boxes in SIPOC. So let me answer the last one first. Yes, right? When you build your SIPOC, these are going to be the core processes, right? So in this one, again, I'm using it because it's simple. That's your core processes, is these 5, right? Marketing, qualifying, acquisition, dispo, and TC, right? And to the first question, yes, you absolutely have multiple SIPOCs. Even in this example, it looks like one because marketing is usually pretty heavily outsourced, so we include all of those in one process. It's usually pretty simple, not always. But you're going to have different marketing. So even though you have, after the marketing channels, it's the same process no matter what, you're still going to have multiple cash conversion cycles. Right, so it's important. I'm glad you brought that up. For example, in this one, which again is going to go a few different places even after this, you're still going to have your multiple marketing channels, and then, for example, direct mail. Even though you may acquire the property the same, if you wholesale it, that's one cash conversion cycle. Right? If you choose to fix and flip it, that's an alternate one. So yes, you will have different ones based on what you do. And I think because you were at the event, so I'm remembering some of that conversation. It's almost like your cash conversion cycle is longer, right? Because you kind of have the whole acquiring the property, and then you go back through and work to sell it a little bit different way. Like you said, the lease option. So it's almost like combining a few of these together. So yeah, you might have a more complex one, I think, without, haven't met with you specifically on that yet. I'd imagine yours is probably going to be a combination maybe of the front side of this one and then adding in some of this stuff later. But yeah, it might be a little more complex, which means your cash conversion cycle is probably longer, but it's still the same principle, right? We'll identify what is that cash conversion cycle, core process by core process after that. And the way that we jump between core processes, why don't I just do all of the front side? I like to define it by, we're going to go between key performance indicators. All right, that's kind of the way that we do the process maps. The goal of the process is to perform, right? So we're going to build a process map to show us how to achieve each key performance indicator, right? And if you're already tracking key performance metrics, right? Because you know that you're saying these metrics, this is the most important thing. This is what tells me, are we on track to succeed or not? All right, if you have those metrics built and you don't have a process map that tells your team how to get there, your numbers probably aren't as high as they could be because we haven't outlined the path we'd like them to take, right, to achieve our desired results. Right? It's almost like, I really wish that we could, repaint this room, and I want it to be gray. And you tell your team, you know what, we need to redecorate. And then that's kind of it, right? And what you're tracking is how many square feet of the wall are now gray, right? And we haven't really told them that's what we're looking for. We haven't really told them exactly how we want it. We just give them this real broad, we'll go do this. And we hope that they end up understanding what we're saying and end up accomplishing it perfectly. And that's not usually the case, right? Derek is a very good mind reader. Most of us are not, right? So we're going to have very clear expectations. All right. We're doing good here. I'm going to move on to, let's talk a little bit about, we've done some of this before, and I don't want to bog down, so I'm not going to do the entire process intro again. But as you're documenting your process, let me just give you this. Very important that this is legible, right? The easier these are to look at, the more likely they are to be used. And yes, that is somewhat embarrassing, that's how we work, but that, right or wrong, that's just how it is. If it looks very complicated, it's not going to be used. All right, so make sure these are very legible, easy on the eyes. We want to build these. That's why we do it intentionally, right? It's straight lines as much as possible. We don't want to have a bunch of crossing lines or anything like that. So as you build these out, like I said, I'm not going to go through what each shape means and all that type of stuff, but let me highlight some common mistakes. As you're building these, make sure to include multiple swim lanes, right? Whether you're using Lucidchart or something different, use the multiple swim lanes. That's going to allow you to distinguish between the different roles that are involved, right? Very important step, even if you are both of the roles, right? Or you are all 3 or all 4 or all 8,000 of the roles that are involved in the process map, please identify the different roles responsible, because as you're looking to delegate, as you're looking to hire, it's not, everyone loves to take their, highest title and they apply that title to all of the tasks they do. I met with people and it's like, okay, so who's following up with the leads? I'm the CEO. It's all right, you might be the CEO. The CEO is not the person following up with the leads. That is your follow-up specialist or your lead manager, RESS, or whatever term you guys like to use. All right, so very important to identify what role you're sitting in at the time you're doing that task. Right, that's how we can avoid the role confusion that we're going to get into more later. All right. Another thing, your key performance indicators should come at the end of the process. Now, let me give you an example where I get pushback sometimes and I make a point not to budge. All right. Let's say that this was acquisitions. A lot of times we will actually get the contract signed somewhere in here. Okay. So for the answer to that question, right? The question might be, did they sign the contract? And if yes, we say, oh, well, the contract is signed here, right? What I like to do is I like to put these process indicators at the end of whatever needs to be accomplished before we would count it on our stoplight report. All right, so if your acquisition needs to, yes, we get the contract signed, but they need to update the CRM, right? They need to collect EMD, they need to whatever, right? Notify the rest of the team. Whatever needs to be done so that way we can count it, that needs to all happen before we'd say, all right, performance indicator reached. Okay, so there might be a few extra steps between the physical signing and us being able to count it and therefore the end of the process. But we do want to go between key performance indicators when we are looking at these process maps. All right, let's go with KPIs briefly, right? I'll kind of come back and talk more about process indicators in a second. But with key performance indicators, there's a few things you want to look at, right? So it's not just the number of contracts signed. And some of this but I want to make sure, because this applies to every process we do. It's not just marketing, it's not just sales that we need to be tracking. So we might want to know the raw number when it comes to contracts signed. Yes, you want to know how many actual contracts you got last week, right? We also definitely want to know the cycle time, right? And your cycle time it's an example process. Let's say hypothetically it's acquisitions. That cycle time is going to be defined as the time it took from entering the process until we could exit the process. All right, so you do want to know the cycle time for all of your core processes that make up your cash conversion cycle, right? Because what we're going to do is we're going to add those together and we're going to get your total cash conversion cycle length. But when we have it identified on a process by process basis, we can see where the most room for growth is. All right, so for example, the reason this is important, if you happen to be very good at getting things to closing, right? Like as soon as, closings are never delayed for you, you're very quick, that's about as optimized as it can be. The tendency people do is say, you know what, I'm really good at this, but I can be better, right? Let's see how much faster can we do it. And we spend a couple months shaving like 2 days off of that transaction process. And that's great. I'm glad you saved 2 days, right? But what we find is that, well, in your acquisitions process, like in that same amount of time, right, we could have spent that 2 months and we could have saved a month, right? And we could have cut a month off our cash conversion cycle if we would have focused our efforts here, because that's where the most waste is. All right, so it's important to have your cash conversion cycle identified per core process. All right, so that way we do understand how can we better track, how can we plan. All right, Jeanette, I just saw, how are you calculating cash conversion cycle? So roughly, again, the entire thing, each cash conversion cycle, and you'll have multiple, is going to be, again, shorthand is money in, money out, right? So from the time you spend money on marketing to the time you get paid at the very end, right? That's the entire cash conversion cycle. When it comes to each cycle time for the core process, that's going to be performance indicator to performance indicator, right? So it could be money in to lead received, right? Lead received to appointment set to contract signed, etc. Right? That type setup. And if you're not real estate or if you use a different model, that's okay, but that's the concept we're going for. If that doesn't answer your question, let me know. All right, then the other things we're going to look for and consider with those performance indicators, we might also want a percentage. For example, how many of our contracts signed resulted in closings, right? That's going to tell us our follow-up percentage, which is very important when we go to make projections. Because when we make our projections, we'll work backwards. Those projections are, hey, this is our profit indicators. That tells us what our performance indicators need to be. All right, so we'll plan for, if we have a fallout rate, we need to plan for more contracts than the closings that we're actually expecting. All right. Next, within these processes, another thing that is, it's really pretty low-hanging fruit, but it's often skipped, is the key process indicators. All right, when we're trying to figure out what are our employees supposed to do, right? A lot of times the tendency is to say that our employees are responsible for performance, right? And they're the ones who are responsible for our performance indicators, right? And that's not really true. And before I go any further, I'll come back to that. Let me just state, when I say employees, I don't necessarily mean, it's anybody who's not the owner, right? In my opinion, anybody who's active in one of these processes is an employee, right? If you have a different term, if you like to say team member or whatever, that's totally fine. I'm here for that. I'm just going to say employees for now. All right, so anybody who's sitting in one of those roles, right, as an employee is not responsible for the performance indicator, right? They're also not responsible for solving problems, right? We'll talk more about that in a minute. What they are responsible for is going to be shocking and deal breaking, right? You've never heard this before, I'm sure, right? What they're actually responsible for is just doing their job, right? Which is to complete the process. So in order to track and see, are they following the process? Are they doing their job? We're going to track the key process indicators. All right, one, that lets us know, are our employees following the process? That's an important thing. But two, that also is going to help us identify and find exactly where our problems are. All right, I told you that processes should help you solve problems. It's a very important piece. Okay, and the way that works, key process indicators we're going to look for inside of diamonds. Right now, I'm not telling you to track every single diamond. All right, they're not all worth the effort. And I know it's difficult to manage CRMs, to track these types of things. So I'm going to be very clear, not telling you to track every single option for every single KPI. Okay, but we are going to identify what are the most likely predictors, right, of that performance. Right. So for example, let's stick with acquisitions because we've been there. In acquisitions, right, we need to know how many appointments were attended. We need to know how many offers they made. Right, because once an offer is accepted, right, depending on how you define that, if it's verbal or written, right, that should pretty much get us the contract signed, right? But appointments attended, offers made, right? Those are really the two big things inside acquisitions that we typically see. Those are process indicators, right? So if I'm in acquisitions and I know my goal is to, and again, there's different, theologies about if we should always make an offer or hold the offer, whatever you think. Let's say that I'm in acquisitions and I know I need to attend 3 appointments every day and I need to make two offers every day at least. All right, then I have my clear expectations. That's what dictates what success looks like for me. Right? As the manager, it's your responsibility, to make sure that the process results in the desired performance. Because if your team members are following the process and they're not getting the performance you're looking for, that's not their fault. They're doing what you told them to do, right? That means the process has changed, right? Or the process was never good to begin with, and we need to fix the process. All right, so that's not identifying a process issue. That's not a personnel issue. Another thing to consider as we kind of talk about all this, if someone's not following the process indicators and they've already been explained what their expectations are, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, it's because they've seen that there's a problem with the process. Most of the time, again, not all the time, people are sometimes just lazy and stubborn. I'm fully aware of that. I may or may not be one of those people, especially the stubborn part. But a lot of times people choose not to follow the process when they perceive that it's no longer working. Because even though they may not know how to be maximally effective, they do want to be as effective as they can. So if they see, you know what, this is a total waste of time, this is not helping me get what I need to accomplish done, therefore I'm going to skip these steps. A lot of times if the process indicators are not being followed, it's because they found some sort of issue in the process, some sort of roadblock that you haven't seen yet. So that's a good opportunity to ask, why aren't you doing this? What have you seen? Did you find a better way? It's not always just, and it's never going to be, we found the perfect process. We will enforce this with our rods for the rest of time. This process is never going to change. That's not going to happen, right? All processes will change eventually, right? Based on market, based on a lot of different factors. All right, so key process indicators should be assigned to the role, right, of the swim lane that they're in. And those are really going to be those most important metrics, and that's how we can clearly identify what success looks like for each person. Because here's your KPIs. This is what you're responsible on a daily basis. If you're able to do this, that's what tells me you were successful today. Right? That's where we're going to find those numbers. It's going to come from within the process maps, because that's what tells us, is the process being followed? All right. One more thing, and then I'm going to ask you for questions and feedback, because I'm tired of hearing myself talk. So I'm giving you a warning, so that way you are ready and you're going to have amazing feedback. I have so much confidence in you. All right. But the KPIs, when we talked about all that, I mentioned it briefly, but we start with purpose. We'll talk about that at another time, right? Then purpose is what drives the profit, the need for the profit indicators. So we say, here's our profit indicators. These are our projections, our top line, bottom line, revenue numbers. That profit tells us what our performance indicators need to be. Okay, so it should be all the way through. This is how long our cycle time needs to be. This is how many leads we need. This is how many appointments we need to set, how many contracts we need, how many closings, etc. Right, all the way down the line. From there, all right, once we figured out that performance, that then lets us tell our employees, here's the process indicators that we need to hit on a daily basis. Right, let's say, I'm going to use easy math, not necessarily accurate numbers. Let's say that you get 1 contract signed for every 10 appointments attended, and you need to get 2 contracts signed per acquisitions rep per week. Well, that means we need to have 20 appointments set. So that means each guy, every acquisitions person needs to go on, that would be 4 appointments a day. All right, so that lets you work backwards so you can set expectations that result in hitting your goals. Right? It's not just, well, what do you think we can do? Let's push more just because, right? Not even knowing if that's enough. It also lets us identify, do we need to hire anybody additional, right? Are we at capacity? Are we over capacity? So that's kind of how those KPIs work. The added benefit there, and I try not to ever skip over this, when you're able to build your KPIs that way, and you can show that in order to achieve our purpose, we need this profit, which means we need this performance, which means I need each and every one of us to fulfill these process indicators. What that also does is it works and it tethers our way back up, because it says if we do this, that's going to give us the performance, which gives us the profit, which allows us to accomplish our purpose, which is why we're all doing this in the first place. So now every employee should be able to tie in and see, okay, what I do does matter, even if I don't see it on the micro level and I don't see why this affects sales or operations. We'll work on that later. But it does at least let me see that if I'm able to do this, I am playing my part in helping us accomplish our company's purpose, right? Which should be something that is pretty widely shared and motivating to the rest of the team. All right, I warned you, right, that I was going to ask for feedback here in a second, and I talked for like several more minutes. So I'm sure you have something awesome ready to go. Anybody have any questions or comments so far?
Need some volume. Hey, this is Joe over at Home Source. We sat down and went through this on our acquisitions team, and one of the struggles we were having was getting comps and having those recorded so that we could always refer back to them and see how we did or the reasons why we chose not to move forward. More of a review process, and several of our acquisition team members didn't feel it was worth their time. And partly because we wrote it down, then we could go through it, kind of step by step and have them more understand why we need what we need, when we need it. It definitely was an assist to get them over that hurdle to actually understand, hey, we're not asking you to do this, we need you to do this. But having it written down and everyone seeing it kind of made it easier to convey that message.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons it just conveys authority, right? Instead of just, oh, well, and Joe, you would never have a bad idea. But instead of them just thinking, oh, this is just what is Joe thinking? This is so dumb. What a waste of time. Just the fact that it's documented and part of the process, presented for, review, and then we all collectively agree or are kind of, complied into, we're going to do this, absolutely brings. So that's a good success story. I appreciate you sharing that. All right, let me show you. We'll do a more structured Q&A in a second. But let me show you this. I talked about we don't want our employees to solve problems, right? And I'll clarify that statement a little bit, but it is very important when we're going through our process maps and you see that your employee's not doing something the way that you would expect them to do it. It's a good opportunity to ask why, right? It's not just forced compliance just because, right? They probably found some reason that they decided to change, right? Maybe not. That's usually the minority, okay? So figure out why they're changing. What that is they're not telling you like they should, but they did identify a problem, which is absolutely something we love when our employees do, right? We want our employees to both identify problems and ideally, we like them to present a solution. Here's a problem I found. Here's how I think we should solve it. Okay, what we definitely do not want is, I found a problem, I'm going to solve it, and tell no one. All right, because then we're changing the process, which means without any documentation, without any conversation, no one actually knows we changed the process, and that is very similar to anarchy. Right? We don't really know what's going on at that point. We may as well not have processes, okay? So we don't really want just blanket, I'm solving problems and doing it all on my own. What we are looking for is identification and then solutions, right? So I'll show you this. This is very simple, right? But I think it's important to highlight these steps. Once we identify an issue, ideally this is the employee. It's not always, right? It could be the manager of the department, could be upper level management, right? Whoever identifies the issue, this is still the recommended path to take, right? We might present a solution to the manager, especially if you're downstream, right? If you're upstream and you're trying to coach your manager on, here's how I would solve this problem, I'd probably get their feedback first. That's just me. But then the manager needs to decide, well, can I solve this problem? Do I think I have what it takes to fix this? Do I have the information? Whatever. If yes, we're going to create the implementation plan, figuring out what it looks like. We're going to notify all the necessary employees. Hey, this is what we're going to do. The employees will take it back, implement that change, and then we're going to test whether or not it works. If it does work, awesome, we found a better way to do things, right? We made a better wheel. If it does not work, right, then now we're back to the beginning. All right, let's see. What didn't work? Let's split test. Let's try and punch that up. It's going to go back. If the manager feels like, you know what, I need to get wider input on this, right? I need to escalate this. That's when we're going to go the next step up in the process ownership chart. We call this position the leader. And only then is the leader brought into play to do the same thing. Can that leader solve the problem? right? If yes, you'll notice, this is very important. This does not just go, the leader solves the problem and becomes the great savior, right? And does and implements the change himself. That's not how it works. Your leader may go back to the manager. The manager will then collaborate, create the implementation plan. The manager's still the one who are notifying the employees of the resolution. We're still going to go up and track the results, right? It needs to go through the chain of command both ways. I'll explain why in a second. Lastly, the innovator, that's what the term we use in process ownership chart. Only if the leader, right, we've escalated through, we haven't been able to solve it, only then do we bring the leader in to make that final call and to test out their idea. Okay, now the reason that we have it structured this way, we'll talk about how to make this faster in a second, but the reason we have it structured this way is because, and I promise you've either been a part of this or you've seen this happen, right? Typically, if we don't follow the chain of command like this, what we end up doing is we say, if there's an issue identified, we're going to instantly bring that all the way down to here, to whatever level, right? Whether it's the CEO, COO, whatever level, right? And then what happens after we encourage the behavior of, I'm the only problem solver, I need to solve all of the problems, we then get mad and we get frustrated that we are solving all of the problems. And how come no one else can solve problems? You don't need me for this? All right, when that's the behavior that we have developed in our team. Okay, so we need to make sure we go through. And also another reason for making sure we go back down the chain of command, right, is because we don't want to diminish our managers, right, anybody in the middle, by just totally bypassing them and their ideas and their results. I want to empower those leaders. So even if it's, hey, here's what I think we should do, this is what we're going to roll with, you can let them still do their job and manage the implementation of it, right? Track to make sure it works. All right. I guess kind of last thing here with problem solving, very important that this doesn't always, because looking at this, you may say, this looks like it's going to take forever, right? Because if we identify the solution, hopefully we do that quickly, don't have everything tracked, so that takes a while, right? Then the manager tries to solve it. And let's say you're pessimistic like I naturally am, and we say, we try to solve the problem and it doesn't work. So then we say no, and then we bring this person at work and we create the plan, try it, it doesn't work again. Then we go all the way back through. Like, how long is that going to take? Like a month? And that is why we have meetings, all right? Whenever we're crossing over too many swim lanes and we want to avoid all the time delays that are inherent every time we cross a swim lane, only way to avoid that effectively is going to be a meeting with everyone involved, right? So if you say, you know what, I can tell, right, your manager looks at it, I can tell this is a bigger level problem, that's why we're going to talk about it in the weekly RISE meeting, right? We're going to add it to that issues list. We're already on with all the necessary people who can have some input. We're going to solve that once and for all there, right? So we can still shorten that cycle time for solving our issues in an in-person meeting, but it's important to make sure that we still follow the general structure. Have the manager implement the plan, have them be the one who communicates back and forth, so that way we're not encouraging, well, I'm going to solve the problem anyway, so just bring it to me. All right. I'm sure everyone is now super psyched about problem solving. You're excited about processes and being able to identify more problems effectively. If you're someone who identifies and says, you know what I love to do is I love to solve problems. I hear that. Awesome. I promise, don't get worried. You're not going to run out of problems to solve if you use the system, right? You are never going to run out of problems to solve, right? At least I haven't. If you have, I don't want to hear about it, okay? You're not going to run out of things that you can improve. Okay, what we're trying to do is we're trying to filter so that the right people are dealing with the right problems at the right time. Okay, if somebody is paid to deal with the highest level problems, let's only fill their time with the higher level problems, right? Your employees are not really paid to solve problems, right? They're, again, paid to do their job. At best, we'd like them to identify, maybe present a solution. All right, so let's let them focus on that. If we can get everyone focused on what's most effective use of their time, that's how we're going to become more efficient and effective together as a company. All right, let's go. I'm going to let you take it back to the slides there.
All right. While I'm pulling up the PowerPoint here real quick, anybody have any questions that they want to kind of put in here at the moment. And we'll give a couple minutes to it, and we can also take a quick break as well while people think of questions. If anybody has to just take some time to get up or whatever, you let us know. But
That was Derek trying not to say go to the bathroom.
yeah, and I'm not gonna say go to the bathroom on camera, but
Too late.
thank you, Dave. Anyways, if anybody needs to, let us know. If you have by any means questions or whatever, we can take this time. But basically, what we'll get into next is procedures and training and all things great like that. Got is that Andrew throwing something there? Oh, Andrew said, "What's your famous quote, David, about people wanting to put tasks in process maps?" Oh, I'm trying to
I'm
think.
not sure.
Put tasks in process maps.
I don't know. I'm gonna ask Andrew for my famous quote on that. Oh, the difference between how and why. Yeah,
Oh,
process is what you do. Procedures how you do it. All right, policies when you do it. That's the rule of thumb. Yes, there's some gray area which we'd love to help you with, but that's knowing when to include and what level of detail to go to. What you do, update the CRM. How you do it, assign this status, update contact, first name, last name, address, all that stuff. That's procedural. That's how. That's what Derek's gonna help you cover in a second. But yeah, good point. Make sure we identify the distinction between when are we zoomed in real far and when are we zoomed in a little further out.
And if anybody has anything that they want to say, obviously throw in the comments. But if we're all good, we're all still alive, maybe put like a thumbs up on like the reactions if you can. Obviously, I know Home Source is alive because they got the camera on Melissa. But you guys are still running strong. But everybody else with the no cams, any type of interaction would just at least show that we're doing something right.
That's gonna be your KPIs.
We got
I guess-
Abby. Go ahead, Melissa.
Sorry, the question. So we actually have like some of our process map in Lucidchart, but we've never really used them. So I guess how do you take it? I know that's horrible to say, but I'm just gonna throw myself under the bus. So we've had them and but we don't use them. So I guess is there probably because we don't have the second part done, the procedure to go with the processes. But I mean, I don't know. So I don't know, how would you implement using these process maps
Sure.
in training, if that makes sense? Because we do also have an onboarding through Trainial that one of our team members created that is amazing. But would you just put the process maps in there, or you know what I mean? So that you're utilizing, because you're spending time making these. So
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different ways to make sure that we get those implemented. Right, so let's start. First is KPIs, right? Because just like we don't want to track KPIs, at least it's not really fair to track harsh KPIs if we haven't built the process, taught the process, and explained how we want that done. But once we have done all those things, we really need to track KPIs because that's what's holding people accountable to that process, right? If we just say, hey, by the way, we have a Lucidchart folder somewhere, and in there is all our processes. That's, as you've seen, that's not going to cut it, right? We need to have KPIs built from those process maps that are tracked. So that's kind of the first wave there. Second, we highly recommend running a weekly process meeting. Now, before you get really excited about the prospect of another meeting, let me preface and temper your expectations a little bit. This weekly meeting does not even necessarily need to be every single department every single week, right? It can be the integrator or whoever, right? It can be one person who goes around meeting with a different department each week and rotates through. The main purpose of that meeting is just ongoing maintenance and to keep those processes fresh in the mind of everybody. So, hey, this week we're going to talk about marketing with the marketing team. We're going to review the process. Is this still accurate? What are your pain points? That's an important question to ask your employees, right? What is keeping you from being able to do this better? You'll get a lot of good information that way. But also, is there anything on here that doesn't make sense? Right? Is there anything that needs to be changed, anything updated, anything that you don't do anymore or you don't understand why we do? Right? That meeting could take up to an hour, right? We don't want it to go longer than an hour. But it also could be 15 minutes, right? It could be very quick. Let's review the process, make sure we're on the same page, review our KPIs, boom, let's go either back to work Or it'd be better off go out and look at the clouds for 45 minutes than fill up 45 minutes with dead time in the meeting. So adding the KPIs and then reviewing those processes with your team regularly, because what'll happen, I don't know when you documented those processes, and you don't have to, tell us. It could be recently or it could be a long time ago. But if it's been more than a few months and you haven't looked at that process, odds are very high that that process is no longer accurate anyway, and it's out of date. So having that regularly scheduled, let's put eyes on the process, let's try to make it a little bit better, is going to keep the processes relevant, because it's going to keep them in front of our team, and it's going to show the most demoralizing thing I'll see when I meet with teams who haven't done it for a while is they look at the process and it's just, oh yeah, we don't do any of that anymore. And I can't tell you how many times we've had that happen because they don't review the process regularly. So KPIs force that accountability to the process. Right? It's very important. But second, keep them in front of the team. If you need, some people really enjoy printing them out and making it, if you have an in-person office, other people just send PDFs out and ask or give, in Lucidchart, you can give comments only access, which I highly recommend. You don't need everyone editing the process. But give away that comments only access to let them, like, hey, what do you think? Let me know when you see problems or when you have a question or you see something that you think could be better.
I'll add to that too, Melissa. Everyone, I would assume on this call probably knows how to drive in some extent, right? If you got in the car, you need to go somewhere, you're not even thinking twice about what you're doing. You just automatically know how to get there safely, right? But if you flash back to when you didn't know how to drive and you were first learning, there's probably times where you're like, what do I do next? Where do I go? Or, do I have this on, right? And so like you kind of had to get coached through the process of learning how to drive. And that's what that process was, ultimate use was really great for, right? But if there wasn't really any change to how you needed to drive or what you needed to do to drive correctly, then you've already learned it, you've trained on it, so you're good, right? You don't really need to review too much unless you're getting into car accidents, right? Like you probably need to look at your process of how you're driving. But that is really like the case there, right? Like and are trained on it. It's written right in the, it's just right there, right? You don't need to go back to and look every time you need to drive. If you do, I won't make fun of you, but that's probably a little unsafe. So you need to learn it. Yeah, you need to learn it to some extent, right? And so that's kind of like, if a good analogy there, really simplified, overly simplified, but obviously in the business world, the driving part changes all the time, right? We're always trying to change how we do things, improve it, whatever. So that's where, when he's talking about continuously improving and reviewing, you're making sure you know how to drive, right? So it's like the whole point on that. So that kind of helped to kind of explain how you would view and make sure that, because I'll go into this whole, again, we're going to get set up on how to make sure you have everything set up, but then what you need to do to actually implement it as well. Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
I guess I don't know that we stated this clearly, but just to make sure we state it, because it's the obvious point that does get overlooked sometimes. Make sure your team actually sees the process maps, right, in order to use them. Because I've done, unfortunately, I've had a lot of those meetings too, where I'll meet with a manager or whoever, and we build this absolutely exquisite process, right? Best process that's ever been built. And we make some changes, we find some breakthroughs, and a week or two later, hey, how are those changes working? Is that performing the way that we hoped it would? And it's always, they kind of look guilty. Like, I don't know. It's like, oh, well, can we ask somebody? No, I don't know if they're doing that or not. Did you tell them? No, I didn't. Oh, no. All right, so make sure we do actually present those. And then I saw Myra, it looks like you said, are there any metrics or ways to identify how deep into details we need to go? Because your issue is to cover all the details.
All right.
So yes, good question. Essentially, there's a couple different directions I'll take this. First, we're looking to document the rule, not the exception. Okay, so if it happens less than 20% of the time, we're not going to put it in a process map. And honestly, if it happens more than 20%, there's still like a gap there, right? Like between 20 and 35%, we may not include it anyway, right? There's, again, more on hands-on variables that I'd look at that point. But definitely don't want to cover every single exception. It's not what we're looking for. That's what you have managers for, right? If it's something that it's not part of the process, it happens once a year or something like that, our managers can afford to deal with that problem. Okay, so that's what you have managers for, is for those exceptions. But also, really good rule of thumb, if you're in Lucidchart or really any of the softwares will do something similar. When you go to build the process, right, and you're using those shapes, if those shapes start to expand, right, and they get longer and they get bigger, you're including procedures, right? I do, 30 something hours of process mapping a week on average. And I probably have 2 or 3 shapes. I'm being generous, right? Probably not that many, but maybe 2 or 3 shapes a week that will not fit inside the box. All right, so it's very important. I appreciate the quotes there. I'm the one who came up with that quote, definitely, Andrew. Thank you. But if you see those shapes start to get too big, that's a very easy way to say, you know what, I have way too much information here. Right? That should almost never happen. Also, if your process maps start to look like they're a marathon and not a nice jog, then it's probably too much, right? If it's miles and miles of process map that you're scrolling through, maybe you have multiple processes that we just haven't split up by performance indicator, or more likely, especially at the beginning, you're just documenting way too many steps. For an example of that, I'll use CRM because everyone loves CRMs. Instead of saying update the CRM and potentially, you want to split that into 2 steps and say update CRM with status and add notes. Sure, okay. But if you are open the CRM, sign in, add contact first name, add contact last name, next box, add contact address. I probably lost 5 people from the webinar just while I was saying that. That's way too much detail. We don't need all that, right? It's just update the CRM, update notes if you really want to. That's about all we need, right? Derek's going to show you how to do the how-tos and to explain how do we really do this. Yeah. But that's not going to be necessary for the actual process map.
All right. Great questions. We will definitely have another Q&A time as well, just in case you guys think of more for the process side, which I'm sure you probably have none, according, with David's expertise in teaching.
Oh, yeah.
But as we go through this procedure stuff, please put some more in the chat, think of some more, and then we'll definitely get into it. So, all right. First, I'm going to tell a couple stories, right? So, my terrible onboarding experiences that I had, when I was younger, some of my more earlier jobs before we got into this and really learning how to hone in on our expertise here. But first one here. So I actually got one of my first jobs was a dishwasher. And as exciting as that is for me, I was like, great, I'm going to make some money. So I did it, right? And so on my first day, there was, they brought me back to train me and everything. And the thing that they showed me was this process of we have the sink, we have the dishwasher, great. Here's some dishes, you have your water and whatnot. And that was it. That was all they showed me. They didn't show me anywhere where the dishes went. I had to go search. There's absolutely no expectations of pace, how fast. He was just showing me how to do it. And that was it, right? So I'm like, okay, I've washed dishes at home. Maybe I'll just treat it like that, just get through the day. What ended up happening is that same night, my first night, dinner rush came in, and I see, the chefs are like, we need more of this, we know this. And what ends up happening is they had to help me so they could get the dishes that they needed to actually be able to make more meals. So I was actually holding up the downline of performance on my side of the bill. And I thought, I was just a dishwasher, right? I don't matter here. I'm just, getting some money. But actually it was affecting their performance on their ability to create, and make food. And so it really just showed me because I was not taught how fast I was supposed to move or who I was supporting and not shown the importance of it, the purpose, as simple as it is, I was actually hurting everyone else around me. And I didn't mean to, right? So I felt bad. But what that ended up doing is make me feel frustrated. I'm sure the team members that were like, who's this new dishwasher? He doesn't know what he's doing. They were frustrated. And so again, restaurants, so simple, but on a business level, as we go to hire new people, it gets frustrating because if we don't have the right training put in place, then the rest of the team is like, we have a new person coming in. That's going to be a hassle, right? Instead of thinking, no, this is great. We have more opportunity. It's going to be, a good breeze. We're going to meet new people, and they're going to be able to do it easily. So obviously, there's a lot to learn from little situations like that. And I'm sure plenty of you have had jobs in the past that you're like, what? Yeah, that was terrible. Now that I'm thinking about it, what did me coming into this business affect other people and how I was able to be onboarded, right? Where did I miss? And so that is one of two. The second one is probably a little bit more up your guys' alley, but In construction, I was a sales role. They told me you are the guinea pig, and I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. A little challenge. I'm gonna be the guinea pig, and I don't know if anybody has ever said that for some of the roles within their businesses, but to me it sounded awesome. To them, they're probably like, what are we gonna do with this kid? And it was like, trying to figure that whole scenario out. But the thing that happened was actually, we get brought in, they have a meeting. There's like, we're gonna do 10 calls a day. I'm like, oh, 10 calls, that's it, okay. And so I guess I should make these 10 calls super, super important. And obviously you want to make any call worthwhile, but I spent way too much time researching, trying to make sure that this call was perfect. If I'm going to do 10, I'm going to do 10 perfect calls. But they never taught me how to do the calls. So it ends up actually going into this type of like, oh, I'm going to procrastinate and research as much as I can, prepare the perfect script, and then nothing's going to happen on the call. I'm going to leave a voicemail, right? So it was literally like, it never actually helped me create a performance for the team. And so I always felt like I was lacking or, slugging behind. And when I go to ask the sales manager, he had no time and he didn't really have the answers for me. He was still trying to figure out the answers as we were going through. So the lack of structure was actually really detrimental to my experience there. I ended up staying there for 3 months, but the part that I always leave with is I did get them a sale right at the end of the month. So I always felt like I earned my position there and I got out. But either way, I didn't understand my work. I felt like a leech to the business. I wanted to succeed and give them all, right? I was trying, but opportunity cost was severely high. In fact, I could have done way more, right? So the expectations, everything there, the training, all affected my ability to perform in this role. So again, if you think through maybe employees you've recently hired, your experiences with other teams, and just think through like what type of experience are you creating and implementing for your teams, right? What are you going through? What is someone else supposed to go through that's going to help the rest of the team and the rest of the downline? So again, like that's kind of a high level of why it's so important. But let's go to some problems here that you're probably experiencing, right? So again, kind of going through an unclear path of training, right? If I'm coming on to do a role and fulfill it, I need to know exactly like what am I learning at a high level, right? And so we'll go into how to create that. Inconsistent training. If you're hiring multiple people and they're shadowing different people, it's like, how do you know that everyone is doing the same thing? That's a problem, right? It's a lot of risk that you're putting on and a lot of stress that you're putting on different people as they are trying to train someone and keep it all together. Slow and frustrating onboarding, right? If someone is not expecting to get some results right away and you're wanting to get results right away, but it's really taking them a while and the expectations for their success is not set right off the bat, everyone's upset, right? Like they're all feeling like they're failures. So team members not sure if they contribute value. This is a big one because if the processes that we create don't help people identify exactly where they fit, and Dave was even alluding to this, how are they going to connect with the value that they provide on the team, right? Or how are they going to validate their other team members next to them that are doing different items when they're like, well, I'm doing this. Why are you doing that, right? It's like we don't have to know everything, but we need to at least know how to connect with our team and make sure that we're on the same path. And then the last couple here, no expectations of pace, output, array. I kind of already said that within the dishwasher scenario there, but what if you're wanting someone to make 100 calls a day or like go through 100 leads or whatever, they might think, oh, I should be able to get there by 8 hours at the end of the day, but it takes them an hour before they call someone. They're already behind, right? So we got to really throw in exactly what someone should expect, maybe like a per 20 minutes. What should I be doing by then? How should I know that my checkpoints throughout the day are getting hit, right? So that's where a lot of the process indicators are really going to show the metrics. But we have to teach them on that, right? Show them and give them a clear understanding of what that looks like. Unclear company structure. Every new hire is just added stress. And then more God meetings, right? They're everywhere. As much as we say like, oh, I'm not having those. Any question that someone's asking as far as like what they should do next, their expectations, and how to just really have a successful day is some type of a God meeting, right? Maybe they're not saying, hey, got a minute? They're just asking you. But still, think it through all the micro meetings that you're having throughout the day, right? And so that's what no processes, no training, no clear resources for people to have are going to cause, right? And so that's what's you're going to experience. So the idea that we're going to try and help you guys create and really understand the importance of is what are my next steps to getting into having job descriptions, complete views of the team, being able to build out maybe my knowledge management system, right? Whether you're using, God forbid, Google Drive, but at the end of the day, if that's what you're using right now, that's what you got, right? If, how do we create company orientation, policies, procedures, cross-training, new hires, and expectations, right? So we're going to go through all of this, show some examples, try and explain them and get you guys on board. But again, if anybody has any questions, which am I missing any in the chat, by the way? Or are we good? Yeah. I think we're good. All right. So we'll continue on. All right, so how do we fix all these problems, right? So, we want to achieve that great training platform. How do we go into understanding what we need to do, right? So again, don't skip what Dave was just talked about, right? Let's follow everything that we just talked about as far as getting processes, starting very high level, right? Because everyone's got that box of this is my business. Let's go into another level of these are my departments. These are, our core processes. This is my cash conversion cycle, SIPOC, all that great stuff. And then starting to understand how do I work through those levels of details. I know Myra said, I get into the detail too fast. Typically, if you keep those, like Dave said, those boxes really simple, you're going to be able to then push the rest of the unnecessary information at that time to a later explanation time, right? And so work through your processes first, right? Don't have to do every single one of them right off the bat if there's something priority, but do the ones that are going to be the biggest impact on your business now, right? If you have a certain role that you're looking to hire or something's just flat out broken, right? Your sales team is just garbage. They have nothing, there's no results. Usually the process is probably the problem, right? We're either confusing people and we're not having clear expectations of what someone's supposed to do. So that's where a lot of the problems can show up, right? So look for those problems and think through like what would have the biggest impact right now. And if you can't think of one, usually starting upstream right at the beginning is always a helpful start just to get someone going through the entire pace. But think of that and then start to really set your goals off of those impacts, right? If you think, I just want everything, either way, you're still gonna have to pick one thing first so you don't overwhelm yourself with saying, I'm gonna create everything right now. So think of that, go through that, and have a clear understanding of what that means for you. And so I'll show you an example is pick a lead manager, right? Melissa, you just hired a lead manager. You need to create training for that. And you guys already are onboarding everything, but everybody else, if you have roles like that are showing up, they're your employees. They need to be supported at the beginning, right? That's the biggest, most important time. So where they feel confident and feel like they matter. So as we go through this, right, let's say we got all of our processes, we picked our goals and our agendas. Let me know if I have any questions, by the way. But we picked our goals, our agendas, everything that we need to do as our next steps. What we want to start doing now is establishing the 3 levels of training. So right here we have general, department specific, and role specific training. And so what I mean by that is as you go through creating content, we start creating training for our entire team, we're going to start seeing things that really apply to everyone. We're going to start seeing like the most basic items like core values, right? Like purpose, getting someone aligned with the orientation and kind of culture of the business. But that's not just going to be to one person, right? That's everyone. So things like that, as you find maybe very generalized software that everyone's using, very easy items that are just going to be to all, like your handbook, that's going to be a very general, specific approach, right? And so department specific, if you can think of whatever department you're in or managing, what content or what access of information do you need to actually be able to succeed as a department, right? And acquisitions is always like, hey, everyone needs to know how to do the CRM, right? Everyone needs to know like what does our sales culture look like? Maybe have access to scripts and things like that. That is where you really start having and getting the right kind of buckets laid out for someone that's going to go through training, right? And so that last one is the role-specific training. And I'll get into what that really means and how to really identify that. But again, if I'm going through training, I want to be able to go through the high level and work all the way to me specifically to the day. That is the goal, right? And so keep these 3 buckets in mind. I'll show them on the next slide. But any questions, by the way? Or, no, I just see kind of things going through. But all right. So as we go through these processes, what you want to do now that you have your process documented and you're really ready to create training and get that set up, you want to compile them on a per role basis. So I looked through all the processes we've done. We have the swim lanes. Pick the same swim lane for every different process, obviously that has like the same title, whether it's lead manager in this case, where is lead manager showing up in your follow-up process, your acquisitions process, or qualifying leads, or whatever that is, and then start seeing all the steps that they're doing. In my opinion, you want to put that start to finish for their flow that they're going to be achieving or kind of aligning with. That is really then going to start showing you, hey, what does this person need to know how to do, right? We have these steps that we documented out, but it's like, now this is giving the clear picture of what I need to have them trained on. Now, doesn't always mean necessarily we have to train them exactly how the process says it, but we need to give them education. We need to give them process steps and that flow so they can follow it, right? And so what we end up doing is we see, great, we have an overview of something, right? The overview of the process. I'm going to show you exactly start to finish of your role, how you're getting into things. Software, this is what you're using. These are the action items and tasks that you're using within this role and how you're going to be able to successfully, build out and finish out your metrics, right? And then we get and start seeing those individual process steps, right? We start seeing, oh, you're going to go from this step to this step to this step, and this is your path to get that done, right? And so if you can start looking through a lot of the process steps that David would, either do with you. I know Home Source, you guys are starting up with us. Great. Those process steps are going to all paint a picture for everyone that is going to be doing something within the business, right? And so this last one is really important too. Educational needs. As we start really understanding, identifying what our team members are doing, if we just train them like a robot, they're never actually going to do it the way, we're not going to have that personal touch that we need to see within the business. So education, especially within the sales role, you guys have seen it within like sales training, just all over the place. Everyone wants to go buy sales training, and that's perfect, right? That's going to show that acquisitions person, salesperson, whatever, how to do exactly what they're supposed to do when they're talking to someone. But other than that, other than the business needs, how they're going to help support their team members internally, how they're going to process something within the, like a contract or whatever, that is all going to be taught from the process, right? So if you mesh the two, if you mesh some training education, whether it's shadowing, role playing, or any type of pre-documented courses that are out there, mesh that in with your process, you're going to create a all-inclusive training setup for your team members as they get into it, right? And there's always things throughout the entire business that someone's going to be able to find. It's not just sales. They always get, the most of it. Everyone loves sales training. But think of something. There's always something that you can create. And so as we go into content and really start identifying what is it going to be that on how I'm going to train them, what I'm going to present to them, that's going to be your biggest way to really show some of the differences between the education and the process steps. Let me get some water here real quick.
Yeah, let me show. I'll take the screen back, and let me show you
Yeah.
real quickly. Just this is a process ownership chart, right? Very simple, but I just want to, because we're starting to talk about the different roles that are necessary and how to identify those. Just like the process doesn't need to live in your head, the roles, the chart doesn't need to live in your head either.
Right.
This process ownership chart we use it really, it helps keep the processes organized so we know what processes we have built, we know which ones are missing that are yet to be built, and we can also see, if I'll zoom in a little bit here, this is just a template. This may not be exactly accurate to your company, but we've worked with a few, so
Yeah.
it's probably close. But we also identify in each process who's sitting in that process, right? What seats are required. And then over on the left, we have a place. This is where I would put anywhere that you are inside that process, we put your name here. So that's going to be an easy way to keep track of who's involved in what seats, how many seats is each person sitting in. If you're sitting in multiple seats, how much time and energy are you dedicating to each seat? What are you supposed to do? So for example, a very common mistake that we see all the time is you hire somebody for, let's say, 2 roles. And again, let's also assume that they're working 40 hours a week. I know that may seem low, but let's just say 40 hours a week for now. Is your expectation that they're going to be 20 hours in one role and 20 hours in another one? Is it supposed to be 30-10 or 35-5? If you don't set those expectations, it's very common that somebody will pick the one that they like more, and they will spend basically all 40 hours in that one role, and they're doing their job, right? And that's not the expectation you have for them. But that's why we need to set it up front, which roles are you supposed to be in. So we use this process ownership chart to push you to identify what are the different departments, right? Who's responsible for managing, leading, all that. But then down below, what are we managing specifically, right? Instead of just kind of a random task list or anything like that, these are the specific processes that each person is supposed to oversee. And then as employees, right? And again, anybody who's involved in one of these boxes down here, I consider you an employee or a team member or whatever term you prefer. But if you're an employee, these are the processes I'm supposed to be active in on a regular basis. Okay, so this is how we can keep all of that organized, and you can help separate between, is this a lead manager? Is this a follow-up specialist? Is this acquisitions? Or, my favorite is just, this is the executive assistant role. Yes, executive assistants do have processes. They have a role. It is not just to do all of the admin work for every department everywhere. right? Those are different seats, different roles that we need to set individual expectations for. So using this, back to what Derek is talking about with all of the, setting expectations for those roles and figuring out what is this supposed to look like.
Exactly. So that third step, build your outline, right? And so as we have the processes, we start seeing everything, build our outline based off of this A, B, C, D here, right? We want to work high level, work through tools and action items that they're going to be doing. Because if I show them, hey, you're going to do this, it's a process, right? I get right into the process as far as like, this is exactly what you're going to be doing. And I'm showing them the software. I'm talking to them, and then I'm giving them, trying to show the steps and everything they're doing. Their mind's everywhere, right? And so if I don't try and work them through one thing at a time, they're going to be confused, and maybe the training won't be as easily retained as we, would hope it would be. So as we go through our outline, really start breaking that down from company orientation, setting the culture, setting core values, all the long-term goals that someone's going to have to go through. That's one thing, right? Getting through that handbook, great. Then we go into our process training, right? Because we have an overview of the company now. If we've done those processes, we should be able to show them, hey, this is everything that the company does. This is how we work. This is how we make money, right? And this is where you are. And then right when we break that in, they should start really adapting to, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what's expected of us as far as our goals and the expectations that we're setting. Now this overview and the software is really making sense. Show me these processes, right? Get me into what I'm supposed to do, how am I supposed to communicate, and show me those expectations so that I can then come out of the gate running, right? And so that's the idea. Education, if we can tie it in to really just help someone adapt to the persona of what we want them to be, whether it's a sales role, if someone's a little bit not exactly on our sales side, we need to be able to establish that, right? And so that's where a lot of this comes into play. I have an example I'll show later. And again, if anybody has any questions, let me know. So once we've built our outline, our next step is then going to be start identifying what content that we can create, right? And so building content, and maybe I'll go to the next slide just a second just so I can get this going. We have 3 types of content, right? So my favorite one all time is make a video, right? It's really it's the fastest way to create information, and then also the fastest way for someone to learn and receive that information, right? It's efficient and it's effective because you get the visuals, you're able to talk over what you're doing and really create that good experience, right? No one wants to just, there probably is some people out there. Most of our people out there are wanting to watch a video, right? It's just the day and age that we're in. Social media has destroyed our attention spans and everything that we have. And so if we can create videos from our training, that's really what is going to drive results. If we can then break them down and make them more digestible, so it's not an hour-long Zoom like the one we're doing right now, don't show someone this. We want to be able to break that down in training as well, right? And so create digestible things within 3 to 5 minutes of videos that someone's gonna be able to connect with on their training. So if we can do a screen record, great. Show what they're gonna be doing. Show exactly what someone's gonna be doing as far as steps and going back and forth between softwares or typing something out, maybe even reviewing something. But if it's really kind of getting someone to connect with maybe orientation or just one-on-one on expectations, use your face cam, right? Talk to them as if you were to have a conversation with them in the room, and document that information so that you don't have to keep repeating yourselves and maybe you mess it up later on, right? That's the part where the consistency comes into play and is able to stay key when we document information like this. So, sorry, I've been a little sick last week, so I don't know if you guys can hear it. But the next one here, pictures and descriptions, right? So if we can get videos, great. But if we can also tag in taking screenshots of what you're going to be doing, maybe showing exactly, marking up that screenshot, showing exactly what someone's going to be doing, creating that clarity around the actual next steps that are going to have to be taken. Some people learn that way, right? If that's all we can do, let's do it. Do something. Don't just write out a checklist and that be it. The checklist at the bottom is supposed to support all the other information that we create for our training, right? And so I don't want to get too in the weeds, but if you could put a small paragraph in to explain, perfect. And then tag in the 1, 2, 3 steps, a checklist of, hey, you're going to do this. Just to repeat it, here is the kind of summary of what you're doing, kind of going down the list and getting someone to kind of align with that content and fully learn it, right? So I'm going to go back here, but that's the content piece, right? So once we build content, then we want to start creating some tests, right? Because if I'm going to be training on something for an entire day and you're telling me all I can do is sit back, relax, kind of watch, go through some videos, kind of see some stuff, read it. But I'm not going to actually have to be held accountable on what I'm doing as far as what I'm learning and education and everything. That's going to be a problem, right? I'm not going to retain as much. I'm not going to be as intentional with what I'm learning. So let's put a small test, right? Emphasis on small tests. It doesn't have to be SAT type style where, you are by yourself for an hour and a half. You have to answer every question correctly or you're a failure. No, we're going to give kind of like, hey, what did we just talk about right here? Kind of tag in maybe true or false questions. Just real brief on what we actually documented, right? Don't ask a question about something you never talked about, because that would be like, where did this question come from? I wasn't prepared, right? And so I'll try and show an example of that later on if anybody wants to see
Starting
more.
to sound like college.
Yeah, we're not trying to make this college. But next, right, once we create all that outline, create our content, our tests, then we have our training put in place, and we want to assign it to the right people. So again, that's where it comes into the general bucket. Everyone, department specific, right? If it's, acquisitions, you probably got lead managers in there. You got your acquisition agents or whatever. Have them all see that type of training and have access to it so they all can connect. Then it's the role specific training. And one of the most important things too is asking for feedback. If you don't open people up to actually being able to respond to, hey, you know what, I didn't get this part. Don't, rip on me for not being able to get this part. Maybe, looking within yourself as far as like, hey, the content I gave them, was it actually helpful, right? Was the training I'm doing going to help someone actually go through this training and be able to align with the content and the steps that they have to do to be able to fulfill their job? It's so important. And then continue the improving cycle. People always want to kind of do a one-stop shop of, I created something, I'll never look at it again, as David said. And if we do that, it's as if we should have never done it, right? You have to commit to improving constantly, or at least reviewing what you've documented. And that's where if you stick at the 80% rule of what is actually happening 80% of the time, and then document the actual change that you're going to create, your improvements will actually be, hey, this is great. We're staying on top of things versus, why am I doing this again, right? I hate doing this. Because, again, the idea of us doing the simple steps that are going to be crucial to our success as an entire company, this is it, right? Documenting processes, doing training, that's where the improvement really helps your business stay consistent on the improvements that they're supposed to make. So, again, if anybody has any questions, let me know. But I'm going to show some examples and kind of go through what it should look like on a very basic level for training, and how to then pull from your processes what you should be knowing or doing as far as creating that outline, right? So kind of starting from square one, we have this process example. This one, I didn't put the title, but it's a lead management process, right? And so there's only one swim lane. It's for the lead manager. And what they're doing is actually going through this is their core process, right? Their core flow for that lead manager. And so you can see we have a lead received. And then the next question is, was a lead received through live call, right? And then we have kind of like a yes or no situation there. But what's really happening is we're getting someone into the start of the process, right? They need to know, okay, I'm receiving these leads. How does that look? I am going to be able to contact them. What does that look like, right? Am I calling them? Are they calling me, right? And we kind of start stating that within the process. And this also should help as far as like what should be your process steps in terms of size. But when we get into the training aspect of it, we really need to hone in on, hey, yeah, you got these leads. This is how you're going to contact them. This is your expectations of where these leads came from. And we start maybe even talking about before the process of educational items that someone's going to be able to connect with. So this to me is one little section of steps that I could create. Where are my leads coming from? This is how you contact them. These are different ways that they call you, you call them, what you should say when you do those items, and work them through that process, right? If I'm going to be able to connect with that, that's what I need. Then looking next, right, because if we get onto the live call, right, we're talking to them. Now we need to be able to qualify them, right? So we go through the different questions. We go through the different steps that they have to do to be able to go through the qualifying process of it, right? So explain that to me, right? What should I be asking? What are the scripts, right? This is where you really plug those in and you train on those scripts, right? Create that clarity around exactly what it should look like, again, 80% of the time, because most of what we're doing should be repeatable, right? That's the whole point of having a business. So if we can really hone in, take our steps, and start identifying, going back here, is lead looking to sell a house? If not, don't hang up, right? Don't keep having a conversation with them and, wasting your time when you could be talking to someone else.
We could convert those leads.
You could convert those leads into long-term follow-up, sure. but figure out a way to get off the call and not have a 30-minute conversation, right? You have to be careful and set those expectations. And as simple as that sounds, sometimes team members are just there to have the conversations versus getting the results going, right? And everyone, there's always a balance. I'm not going to be on this, like yes or no type thing. But you can add something?
I was going to ask you, how long, like, you're giving a lot of explanation about how to do this and how to build the training.
Yeah.
How long should this actual training video be?
Yeah.
Like
So
just for that piece you're showing here.
right. So in my opinion, you guys can see my mouse, but basically from lead received, you're going to be able to find multiple things you could talk about. In my opinion, one of those is, where are these leads coming from? This would be a good chance to talk about your marketing channels and what the experience should be if someone is coming in from direct mail, like PPC or whatever you have, and talk about the differences, right? Would some of those be a little bit hotter or not? What should I say that's specific to them? That could be a whole video, 5 minutes, talking about each individual item, but then there's resources that they should have from that, right? And so as you get into, being able to call a lead from a web form, look at how can you compile these steps into one video, right? So if it's a web form, I see that, I'm gonna call the lead, and did they answer, right? Explain that in 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Don't try and break down each individual step and overcomplicate your training. If you can simplify exactly what the video should entail and break this down into about 3 videos versus having this be 7 videos, you're gonna be able to not frustrate someone as far as how much it takes to get them through the beginning stages of this process. So again, 3 to 5 minutes, see what you can put in there and make it clear and concise, and then give them the resources that they need to be able to do that part. So is that gonna decent answers?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Either way, as we continue through, we start really seeing this process, and we already seen the end of it, appointment set, right? And so once we create this into any type of learning system, this is Trainial. I'm not gonna go into Trainial, but the idea of the outline of Trainial is the whole importance of why we use it. And so start to finish of, you will go through this step first, and then you flow into this next step, right? And so that is the idea of, if I can create this process, follow that same type of flow, create someone to be able to go through an overview, intro expectations, go through some tools, in this case it's Salesforce, and then really break in through, hey, I'm gonna receive and contact these leads. How do I do that? What does that look like? I'm gonna understand our leads, overcome objections. This is where I was talking about tying in education into our training, right? Because if we have these steps of contacting a lead, of how to call them, but then we also talk about, hey, this is what you need to expect when you actually get onto the phone with them, right? This is what you should understand about their situations and everything like that. So again, anytime you're dealing with external people, just in general, within a team, having that understanding of who you're working with and how to understand their situations on a broad basis is always super helpful. But continuing through kind of like the breakdown, we have the tests in between, 2 or 3 topics, right? So if we have expectations and Salesforce basics as a test, we kind of tie those in and really test on, hey, tell me about the lead section that we just talked about, right? And so if we go into Salesforce basics, we see, we have 3 different parts of explaining the software, and then we start going through those items that I was referring to as actionable steps that I can actually go to this and understand I'm going to be doing this on a day-to-day basis, right? I'm going to be using smartphone through LeftMain. If that's what you got, great. But you might have your own phone system through a different CRM. So you need to be able to have access to those trainings at the beginning, or if you ever forget, right? Or if something changes, then it's going to be there and you know where to find it. And so the idea that we were talking about is create a video, right? In this case, 3 to 4 minute video on their lead section, just helping someone understand and how to connect with that. And then what we do with the team is then help them document the descriptions, create the screenshots, and be able to make it simple, right? And so if you can do that from a training perspective, it's going to be easier. People are going to be able to connect with, oh, I understand exactly what I'm supposed to do. And even if I forget something, I have it right here. I don't need to ask you and waste your time, right? And so that's the whole simple type of reason why we're all here, right? Is to be able to get rid of those wasteful moments and create documented stuff so we can have consistency throughout all of our training. So I'm kind of going to just break through it just while I'm here. Salesforce basics in general, the idea of kind of going through the step-by-steps, how to use a smartphone, right? How to call. Maybe what is the importance of the tasks I'm creating or the logging calls that I'm doing? Why do I need to do that, right? Tie that in with every step that you can create, and then make sure that people know exactly what they're supposed to do, right? So I'll go to the next one. This is that how to use smartphone piece. again, we have a video, real simple. Then we have the steps that were actually talked about in written form. This is not only going to be able to make people be able to search things, but then they don't have to watch the video all over again. They could just go directly to the steps if they ever need to, right? And so in this case, 1, 2, 3 with some screenshots, people are able to connect with that, right? And so the idea with all of this is you just have to start somewhere, right? And again, I'm more than happy to re-explain more on if you're finding a role that you need to go into and create that training for, start with the process, get that high-level breakdown, and then start compiling what does this role interact with, what do they do, and make it make sense of start to end kind of format, right? Don't throw a certain step here that's at the end of the process and then, oh, by the way, you need to know this. Make it clear and cut that you know, and make it look like you have a structure to your business, right? And so any kind of add-ons you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I mean, another benefit of documenting your procedures via 3 to 5 minute short form videos is, and I know you're probably all not going to like this option because you really like recording long videos about the same content over and over and over again. But if you record 1 hour, 2 hour long videos, you say, David, you're joking. No one would do that. Oh, I wish. But instead of recording those really long videos that you hate making, your employees hate watching, and then when something changes or when something breaks, what do? Well, you have 2 options of that. Well, more than 2 options, but we'll start with 2. First 2 options, you either do nothing and you just never use that training and that training's never replaced, and it is like your grandmother's living room. It's still stuck in 1991, right? Or this is probably the second most common, is you create like a short follow-up. And there's like, the 90-minute video, and then there's like the 10-minute video explaining that minutes 17 and 33 are now slightly different. And that doesn't work very well either. The other option you're faced with is recording the entire thing over again, and that just sounds horrible. It's hard enough to do it once. If we do it in short chunks, then all right, this 3 to 5 minute video needs to be redone and updated to reflect our new CRM. That's doable, right? We can do that a couple times. Asking somebody, and especially if you're trying to delegate this for someone else to build a training, they are also not going to be excited by the prospect of recreating extremely long videos that are rambling and just not fun to follow.
No, it's perfect. So again, find through everything that you're doing within your processes, get that documented, create the training that you need for your team members, and start small, start simple, right? You don't need to do everything at once. That's what we found is probably the most overwhelming thing for a team is when everybody is trying to document everything at the same time. They're like, are we missing things? Are you? That's not what we're supposed to be doing. You're doing this, so why are we meshing in this way? And that's why when you start high level, work through what is actually supposed to happen, then you get into the training of how things are supposed to actually be done. People start connecting, and the implementation of it is so much easier, right? So using a system, have everybody have access to it. Lucidchart, whatever you guys have, Trainio, whatever, the people be able to have access to the training that you create, so then they can understand exactly what is expected of them. They see what is supposed to be assigned to them, and then they connect on their day-to-day basis within their tasks, within what is supposed to be hit with their goals, and hopefully, and kind of answer your question, back going to like the process and using that, when they have the training and they learn it and they know it, they shouldn't have to look at it every single day, right? As long as things are not changing too much and people can actually align with it and stick with it, that's the whole point of why we do this and why people need to do this for their teams, right? And so I think that's kind of it as far as like these pictures here. But I want to go through kind of just making sure everyone can break down as far as like myths we find ourselves believing in, right? Because a lot of people, and it's really funny too, some of these, hopefully you get a laugh out of them. But the first one is always, I have no time, right? People, it's so ironic when people say, I have no time. It's like, well, of course you have no time, right, to do any of this because you haven't done it at all. So the only way to get your time back is as you hire, you structure their training, you structure their job so that they can actually, work efficiently, run efficiently, and be able to create that successful reason for why you hired them in the first place is to create capacity or create higher metrics and be able to hit higher goals. Anything to add on that one, the I have no time piece?
Yeah, so I guess along with that, just to make sure it's very clear, when you say you have no time, that's okay. Yes, you definitely can do something, but that also might mean you're not going to do everything at once.
Right.
Right. To start with, just get your core processes identified and documented. Right. Like you can do that if you spent an hour a week. You could probably do that in a month, and you'd have your core processes done at a very, very minimal effort. Right. And if that's all you're able to do for now, that's going to get you a lot better than nowhere. All right. If you're, we're definitely not trying to make you, well, it's me and 2 other people, and we have no training, we have no additional hires. Do I need Trainual right now? Well, no, not yet. Right. Start with the procedures, or start with the process, which is going to help you with your KPIs and get clear expectations. As you start to scale, as you start to add more people and add complexity, you're going to start to get more and more questions. And that's when the procedures become more necessary, right? Because if I'm asking Derek, 3 how questions a week, he probably has time for that. If there's me and 10 other people like me, and we're each asking Derek 3 how questions a week, that's where he doesn't have time to do anything else anymore. So yeah, start with what you can do, and then eventually we'll build on that as the business becomes more complex and you have a bigger need. But you absolutely do have time to do your core processes and to get that going.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. The next one is, our structure isn't perfect. This is also always a funny one, because I don't think anybody is ever going to really achieve perfection. That's the whole point as to why we document the 80%, right? We leave that 20% to imperfection, right? And so if you can focus on what is something that we do consistently that's not going to change tomorrow, then you're good, right? Find those key items that people can connect with as far as the length that they're supposed to do, as far as their process, should be my goal for this week, and be able to connect with through the process to actually be able to perform and be, a successful employee. They not feel frustrated.
Right.
Right.
Pareto principle is key on these.
Yeah.
Right. Like when we go through the process, 20% of the time, 80% good. Right. Then after that, we will take a pass at refining them, especially just to show you how. But that refinement is always going to be happening. Right. You don't have to wait to pull the trigger. That's why we say cut it up, do short form videos, among other reasons, but make it really easy to replace. Also, I'm not going to tell Adam you said you don't think he can be perfect.
Our guy Adam, he is perfect. That's why we're here.
Yes,
All right, so number 3, we already have training we did a year ago. That's always a funny one too. That doesn't matter. If you had training you did a year ago and it didn't change, that is probably the most impressive thing I've ever seen in my life.
Is it being used?
Yeah.
Can you still use it effectively? If you use it and you feel you have to weigh in after to correct the training, then let's update the training, right? And that can be very easy if you build it the right way. But yeah, it's not just, in 2012, I put together some SOPs. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's make sure they're up to date.
Yeah, and again, like just keeping it simple with, I'm doing this so that I can continuously look at them, review, because one thing we didn't really go into too much depth is as you go through the process and someone's trying to perform on the process, those little indicators that show up are really going to show you exactly where training might need to happen, right? If there's a certain section of the process that people aren't connecting with, or there's no results coming after that, that might be your indicator as far as, hey, maybe I need to train on this, or the training or process that I have currently in place is not working, right? So if you did it a year ago and you're not tracking, you might be missing opportunity. You might be missing key points that people are kind of doing their own workaround that you're not aware of. And so that's, again, why we just push for do this on a weekly basis, some form of check of, is this still correct? Is this still up to date? And keeping it simple to that point, right? We don't need to overwhelm people by reinventing the wheel every single week. It's just a micro progressions that we can make to really establish good business success within our structure, right? And so number 4 here, no one will use it. That's not true. If you have the biggest key for training, specifically training, is for the beginning new hires to use it, right? That's the majority percentage of why we should create training. The other key percentage is I have current team members that have no idea what they're doing, or I have people that need to be able to cross-train, be a key team player for the rest of everybody in case someone needs to leave or someone does leave, right? We need to have this documented so that someone can actually have this as a resource, right? The processes are huge. You should be using that on a week-to-week basis to make sure that in some way or form that it's viable, right? That it makes sense. Like, we talked about with Melissa, driving the car, you still use it, you just are trained on it. You are aware of it. If that process ever changed and you weren't aware and you didn't know it, you didn't document it, that could be a very bad thing. Something could go wrong. And so that's where the key updates are so important, or probably as important as knowing it and learning it. Yes, you will use it. You just need to train on it, right? We don't want someone to use this every single day. That's not the whole, importance of it. The idea is that they train on it, they have it in the back of their head, they know exactly how to do it, and be able to work efficiently.
Yeah, it's the same with KPIs, right? If you don't use KPIs, your processes probably won't be used regularly. That's not because the process isn't good. It's because we're not holding people accountable. Same thing with the training. If people aren't using your training, well, are you holding them accountable? That's one of the reasons that Derek's a big fan of Trainual and we institute TEST, because TEST help hold people accountable to the actual training. But also, if you don't tell your new team member, hey, by the way, this is our training system, this is what it's going to look like. I put in the chat a little while ago, do we know how long it takes to onboard a new team member? There's a lot of reasons that's important, but one is for that new team member, right? Hey, just so you know, for this this amount of days, here's what you're going to be doing, right? And maybe that includes some shadow time or whatever else that needs to happen. But setting those expectations with them. Most new team members are not going to say, oh, you want to pay me to go through this training? No, I'm not going to do that. No, they'd like to learn all the things that they don't know, right? So if somebody's not using it, it's usually either the training is not great, and it's not easy to use at all, or it's just that we haven't set the proper expectations for those people, especially for new hires. Again, that's usually when people are the most moldable. It's like, I just got hired, I'm still scared of you. So, okay, this is what I need to do.
Yeah, and so number 6, mistakes happen, we would just learn from them, right? That's probably one of the worst things you could possibly do, is just let people kind of learn from doing, because the amount of things that you could have prevented that go wrong, especially, in the real estate space where each deal is a big deal, right? It's not like you're just working on, quantity, you're working through quality as well, right? And so if you have someone that isn't properly trained, or, the fact that they aren't aware of a simple step that could cause something to fall apart, how much does that cost you, right? And so that's the idea around implementing this, right? Because the time that you can spend putting into this, whether it's on that weekly basis or, you put in maybe just an extra hour to try and squeeze in some extra tasks to complete and add to this system for yourself, that is going to be super beneficial, and investing on the defense side of your business. And again, the mistakes that you can prevent, count that up. Count up how many mistakes that have actually happened that you can actually attribute to training, or someone who's like, I didn't know, right? Like, that's the worst thing I think anybody wants to ever hear is, why did you do that? Oh, I didn't know, right? It's like, that's probably so frustrating, right? And the other part of that too is it's not just defense. It is on the offense side of things too. If you have the right training for your team members, then they can properly execute on the offense, and they're not, just relying on what some random sales guru said. It is more so to, our process is solid, we have it documented, and I know it. So I can be confident in what my team is capable of and be able to show that on calls and things like that. You're going to say something?
Yeah, and if we're expecting all of our employees to just learn from their own mistakes, well, then you're just expecting them to be you and do the things that you did, in which case, why do they need you, right? I'll just go do it. If I'm not going to get any training, let me just go do it myself, and I'll take all the results and rewards from it.
Yeah. So what we want to do is kind of offer 30 minutes with one of our guys, go through a process audit. Now, the reason why I want you to do that, and again, I don't know if we can put that scheduling link in the chat. It's totally free. There's no strings attached or anything. The idea is that we want anybody that is interested. Go ahead.
So just your soul.
Yeah, no. The idea is that we just want people to understand exactly where they're at with their processes. Understand, hey, show us what you have, whether it's processes or training, so that we can then help you understand what your most impactful development project needs to be, right? Because if you can have that set up for yourself to where I know where I'm at, this is what I'm training next, or my goals for this year, this is what they are, we want you to be able to have help identifying what you should work on next, so that you don't feel overwhelmed or confused as far as, I want processes, I want training, but I just don't think I can do it, right? The idea around this process audit is to help you understand exactly where you're at, and then go forward on a step-by-step basis to get to where you want to be, right? And so again, we're just trying to create clarity for you and your team. Click on that link, find just 30 minutes, because if you can spend 30 minutes working on your business, this will turn into a whole plethora of opportunity, whether it's on the defense side, like we talked about, on the offense side, like you want it to be a lot. That's why, so many people invest in the offense side, but never take care of the defense as well. And so the idea around getting this process out of going is that you talk with Andrew, you get that clarity set up, and you work through what your next step should be. Whether that's with us or not, you still have the idea of, I know what I need to do. I worked with this team that gave me the clear expectations, and then I'm able to go on and create good systems for my business and go through that. Because, we have programs, great. HomeSource just got on with us. They're doing processes on a weekly basis. Great. The idea of them being able to make sure they have a clear path of what those processes look like is so important. That's why they're here. They're always learning. That's why when they actually get started with the processes, the strategy behind what they do next is going to be huge, right? So that's what this process audit is for, is that you to be able to connect with the strategy that you're supposed to get into for your business, right? And so, again, just spend 30 minutes, go through it, get the clarity you need, and come out of that feeling great. So any questions on anything that maybe in the chat that I missed, anything around procedures or whatever, I can go back through, maybe even share my screen on a different platform and create that clarity there as well. Just want to open that up.
Why it's so important to be able to scale.
We got a question here, Derek. So
Yeah.
Rick was just asking, he just wanted to kind of, I think you skipped over on that, the why nots, the do we need this to scale? I think
yeah.
just giving the team clarity on kind of why it's important to scale is what we're
Yeah,
looking for.
no, I definitely did skip over that one. I remember. Yeah, so what people, I'll go back here. Where's it at?
Not to call you out or anything, but
Yeah, no, I
Maybe
appreciate
that's
that. I'd
right.
rather not skip over it. So
I was gonna have to later if you didn't. So
yeah, it was, they all look the same, right? So I don't need it to scale, right? That when people go through that phase of thinking that, oh, if I just do more on a day-to-day basis, or I just try harder, work harder to be able to grow this team, that they're just going to stress everyone out, starting with themselves. Maybe they're the type of person that can just work day and nights and make something happen, but the lack of ability to lead through training or through processes is going to cost them so much, right? Because there always is that one person that's going to go, the extra mile just to show like, hey, I went the extra mile. What did you guys do? There's always that person that frustrates to fire everybody else that's actually trying to live a life and have balance to their work. So when you go through life without doing processes, doing these trainings and having people try and connect with what it is that they should be doing in the business, you end up leaving it up to human ability versus just lean machine creation, right? And so that's why trying to scale on bad processes, trying to scale on bad training
or no processes
is going to just set yourself up for failure on the amount. And again, that's the mistakes happen part. The amount, if you're trying to scale, the amount of mistakes are going to scale right with it. And that's just going to cost you so much. And so that's where, the processes are huge, especially when you already have an active team. That's going to give them clear direction. That's perfect, right? The training is going to be able to help you actually grow the team and get people connected behind everything they need to be doing. And so, again, we could keep going into so many scenarios with that, but that is what I would feel is, the most important reasons of why people think they don't need it to scale. So.
Right. I think Andrew mentioned it in chat, but it leads to burnout. If you say I don't need it to scale, what you really mean is either everyone else is just going to magically figure out, which all of us I think understand that that's not reality, or what you mean is I can keep doing this forever at a higher and higher degree of difficulty and at a much higher volume. And that is just not going to happen. And if you stated it that way, you'd probably understand that that's not the truth. But that is what you're saying, right? If you just say, this isn't necessary to scale. I'm going to do this 10 times more than I'm already doing it, and I'm going to be able to manage the rest of my life exactly how I want it to. And that's just not going to happen, right? If you can't make it repeatable, if you can't systemize it, and then share it with other people who can repeat what you do without having to go through all the training and the heartbreak and all the other things that you have to go through to get there, if you never get to that point, you will not scale. Right, you will not scale and managing everything else. And even if you start to scale, you're going to burn out, like Andrew mentioned in the chat. and it's gonna crash and burn, and you're gonna, why am I doing this? Let's just fire everybody and go back down to doing a manageable operation at that point.
Yeah. I hope that helped as far as like kind of touching on that point and creating that clarity. But again,
Yeah, thank you.
perfect. Anybody has any questions too, just feel free to pop them in the chat or just speak up in that manner as well. But yeah, again, Andrew said you can't create change if you don't know what is working or not working within your team and business. Leads to burnout. Clear expectations of what, how, and why lead to less frustrations and more efficiency. So yeah, nailed it right there.
See,
That is
I'm
huge.
gonna pick on Johnny because you have your camera on, which I appreciate, but I haven't heard from you yet. You got anything for us?
Not at the moment. Right now, just taking in all that information.
Yeah. I mean, it was awesome information, obviously. So I'm glad I'm glad you're absorbing it all. We would
Yeah,
never do
Eric,
anything
this
less.
is Rich at HomeSource. I got a quick question for you guys.
Yeah.
So we've been with you guys for several years, and we've documented our core processes. But as the company's grown, you know, people go from wearing multiple hats to, as the volume of the disciplines grows, they end up specializing in certain things. What do you suggest for like somebody like us? We have 63 people. Now we're to go back and revisit the core processes, and then each of those disciplines, whether we're mostly a property management company, but everything from collections to renewals, to marketing, to leasing, to onboarding new properties and financial reporting. But there's so much that goes on in those core processes that now we kind of have to revisit all that and look at each of these disciplines and what are the processes going on in maintenance, what's going on, get more granular with centralized operations, because I've got our leadership team is in here. For us, what would you recommend for the folks here in the room to go ahead and go back to their disciplines and say, hey, how do I implement some of the things we talked about today, or identify them at least to start to begin to document the things that are happening day to day, that these are the managers that are in the room here with me. Can you speak to that as a takeaway?
Yeah, so as you're going through, first step is to pull those core processes up. I'm not going to ask when the last time you looked at them is. Hopefully it's relatively recently. But either way, your process is similar to building some sort of structure. They're going to be built for what you can handle at the time and hopefully a little bit into the future. And at some point, as you continue to scale and add weights, those processes are going to break and they're going to need to be re-engineered and strengthened. All right, so that's probably, you guys are going to be approaching that stage if you're not there already. So what we're going to be doing is, here's our core processes. Let's revisit this. Right? One, does it still work? Right? Does it work as well as it needs to? And if the answer is no, which I mean, most likely that's probably where it's at, especially when we get to, is it as good as it needs to be, or is it we need to be in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve, then that's where the first step, in my opinion, needs to be going to the employees who are actually doing the process every day, because they should have the best grasp on what actually is that process, right? What needs to happen if you or I were supposed to update a pointless CRM 800 times a day, we're going to figure out pretty quickly how to avoid that step, right? But if it's just me and you looking at a process map, well, I don't know, you update the CRM, that's easy, right? So asking them, what do you see, right? What do you need in order to do this 3 times more than we're doing now? What would that take, right? What are the biggest obstacles? Really lean on your employees for at least telling you what their problems are. If you give them an open, honest outlet for basically, sanctioned complaining, then eventually they may be surprised. But with your culture, since we kind of know you, I don't think that'd be a big issue. Let them tell you where the problems are, because then we're going to identify those problems, and that's when we can start to look to really refine that. Because doing the process more often, like we might need a robust system, right? Because as you're scaling, that's what you're doing. We're doing the same processes. They may get adjusted, they may get updated, but we're going to do these same processes. We're just going to do it a lot more times. So in that case, okay, all that extra waste that's in there, right? If we only do it 10 times a week and there's an extra 5 minutes in each process, well, that's less than an hour a week. That's not a big deal. When we're doing it 100 times a week, that's significant. So we need to look to really refine and optimize every single part of that process, and your employees are going to be the best way to do it. I can look at a process map at this point and I can tell you, hey, here's some waste that were happening, right? The notification's not going out soon enough. We're going back and forth too many times. We need to reduce that. How could, I can see some stuff like that. So can you, right? You guys have messed with process before. You're the managers. You can see some of that, but we're not going to see the deepest level of here's our obstructions. So to me, step one, getting back into it, pull up those core processes. What do you think? And then without telling everyone else what you think, get what your employees' feedback first, right? Once you have that information, we can take the next best step forward in optimizing.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We will stay on as long as people have them.
I know we're out of the scheduled time, so if you need to hop off, totally understand. Appreciate you being here with us this long. Please take advantage of the free process audit that we joke about it costing your soul, but it's really not going to cost you anything. We want to add some value regardless of if you end up going with us and having us make it a little bit easier for you. So do please take advantage of that. But any more questions while we got you here?
I have a question. Sorry, this is Melissa. I had to go pick up my son, so my video's not anymore.
Unbelievable. Caring about your son? Are you serious?
The question real quick. Because we're considering like working with you guys, and I'm just wondering, I know you do process mapping like all day, every day, which bless you, because that sounds exhausting to me. How many can you get done in like an hour, like realistically?
So there's variation depending on the size of the process and complexity. I think you can get at least one done an hour, as long as there's not politicking going on, which is just two people arguing back and forth constantly. If I'm there, I do my absolute best, and I'm doing everything not to say I make it not happen, but it doesn't happen. If they're short, simple processes, especially once you get to some of those structural sub-processes, you can easily do, between 5 and 10 an hour, right? Now that's usually a pretty simple process, but a baseline, I'd say at least 1 an hour is possible.
Okay. I was just wondering, because that is something that we definitely want to do to start scaling is getting more processes documented, and then doing, like I said, the other side that we never did is the procedure side of it.
Sure.
So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? We got Jeff in here, Sophia, JC. We got Stamp Staff. We see them on a regular. Richard, Johnny, Joe, Doug, Jordan.
This is going to kind of work like one of those all-night camp meetings. We're just going to keep going and asking until you leave. So.
There he goes. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask any questions. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate y'all staying.
We'll see you.